Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to have a look at this tutorial. What I'm planning on showing you and explaining to you is an actual quote that we have used recently in the tender process for a large renovation. And basically, what I've got on the screen in front of you is two documents. One, which is a basic quote, which you can see on the left-hand side. And the second document is a bit more in-depth explanation as to the details and the inclusions that are in each price point. So something that I'd just like to make clear at the beginning is that it's very important that when you are getting a quote or reading a quote, that you are able to compare apples with apples, so to speak. There are many ways in which builders may interpret drawings and information, and there may be many ways in which they can articulate that in the form of a quote to you as the client. And when reading it, it can sometimes be overwhelming and confusing, as one builder might have costs in one area which don't relate accurately to where you think they would, and another builder might hold those costs elsewhere. So it's great if you can get your builders to identify how you want to be able to read the quote, so you can make an educated and informed decision based on accurate information. So what the client and the architect has asked me to do in this situation is they actually outlined to me 15 specific key areas, and they had a brief on each item and how we were to price it. It was an individual request that came through. Not all jobs are requested to be this way, but in this case, this is how the client wanted to receive the information. And it was so, when we provided our costs, he could lay everything out in front of him, and it's an even playing field between all the builders. So what I'm going to do is just explain the left-hand side form first. Now, this is, like I said before, a very generic, but very common way that you may see a building quote. And it's just important that you do get extra information rather than just a figure on a paper, because it can leave a lot for interpretation. But I'll start with a few of the details. So this is just a draft quote. I've removed the customer's name, but this is actually a real quote that we've used. We've got the date of when it was issued. Generally, most quotes these days have an expiry date of about 30 days, sometimes longer. And basically, the reason why there is an expiry date is because rates change, materials change, and the cost of building often changes throughout the year. So there generally is an expiry date. So be aware that if you get a quote and you're dwelling on it for some time, there is a chance that if you go back to accept that quote after the expiry date, there may have incurred additional costs for some reason. So that's just something to be aware of. Quote number, generally this is just a reference from the builder being able to track where their quotes are. A reference, excuse me. As you can see, this is a quotation for a proposed ground floor renovation. Our business ABN and our business address. Now, these are two things that they're of importance to know, not necessarily on a quote as such, but you do need to know the information of the builder before, I guess, making the decision. You want to be able to know, who they are, where they're from. You can look up and see if you need to do any license checks and insurance checks, and that's information that can help you make that decision. So as we go through this quote on the left, as you can see, I have the 15 key areas listed here with a price next to them. And again, the reason why it has been laid out this way in this particular instance is it's because it's been at the request from the client, so they can compare apples with apples. But we have added at the top of the line here preliminaries cost, and I'll get into that in just a moment. Comes down, we've got a total, then a GST with a final figure here. These are our terms. We don't really like to put much detail into this. Basically, it says that this claim is made under the Building and Construction Industry Security of Payment Act of New South Wales 1997. Now, this is a very standard phrase that you may see on quotations. Now, other builders may like to put a lot of information and terms on these quotes. We choose not to. We wait until we get to the contract stage, and that's when we like to have all our terms and conditions in the contract there, which will be another tutorial that I'd like to take you guys through on another day. And that's it. So basically, this just stretches out just over 1 page and 2 pages. But as you can see, it's very easy to read, and it's all line items. So he can actually work out that, you know, item 2, external pool area, that we're charging $105,000. And he knows that when he compares item 2 with another builder's, he can get a good comparison. Now, often builders will only issue this left-hand page, and they keep a lot of things hidden, which is a concern. Why are these prices being hidden, and, you know, what's included, what's not included? So what we like to do is we like to try and give a very transparent look into what we have and what we haven't allowed, as a way to sort of build confidence for you as the client, being able to read and understand and know exactly what you're getting and what you're paying for. So this is basically a scope of works that we have written out, but we've written it out to suit their nominated key areas. So basically, we start with preliminaries. And what preliminaries are is they are costs that need to be allocated for each job that are basically a business expense that needs to be charged to you as the client. In this case, we have been allocating business insurance, homeowners warranty insurance, rubbish removal, site clean, final clean, site signage, scaffold, flooring protection, and site and project management. Now, as you can see in preliminaries, we've charged nearly $72,000, which is a huge, huge price. Okay, and often it can be a question as to why am I being charged so much in preliminaries? Well, there's a few things you need to take into consideration. First one is insurances. So when we're doing these large projects and even smaller projects, the builder still needs to have insurance, and he still needs to cover things like theft on anything that may happen to your property during the build. He needs to happen to any damage that may happen to your build. And he needs to have public liability, workers' compensation for his staff. And this is a 12-month builder's expense that gets passed along. The homeowner's warranty insurance is an insurance that the builder needs to provide to a client when the project is over $20,000 in value. Now, what this basically is insurance for the client to have as backup in case should there be an issue down the track and the builder can't get back to rectify the situation. That's when that homeowner's warranty insurance can be claimed. And that lasts for a period of 7 years. Rubbish removal, site clean and final clean. Also an expensive cost that needs to be factored into the site, often one that is overlooked. tip fees today and getting rid of rubbish is becoming more and more expensive. But it's a reality that these costs need to be charged. Now, obviously, whether or not you're bringing out a lot of rubbish, that's to be determined by the builder. In this instance, there was a huge amount of brick and concrete to be removed from the project, which would be going to a recycle yard, which brings the cost down. But still, in general, there is quite a lot of rubbish and building material that is taken away as waste. We do try to recycle whenever possible, but still, it is quite an expensive thing to have to price in. Site signage. Now, this is a mandatory cost, generally rather small cost, but each site does need to be clearly signposted for safety reasons and WH, workplace health and safety reasons. And it needs to be able to identify to any of the workers on site any sort of dangers that are there. So a small fee is generally allocated for this. Mobile scaffold for height access. So again, it's mainly for safety and access that this fee is charged. And it is basically another small fee, but something that needs to be included somewhere within the quote. So preliminaries is where you'll generally find that. We've included floor protection in our preliminary items. Further down in his items, item 11, I believe, is where we specified his flooring, but we did want to be able to let him compare actual flooring costs. So we have left flooring protection in our preliminaries, and many people may say, well, why do you need it? And basically, it's easier and cheaper to protect a floor and look after a brand new floor than have to try and fix it should it be damaged. And you need to realise that it is a building site and there are many trades and tools often going over a finished floor. And as much as you'd like to have people staying off a floor that's been freshly laid, the reality is at the end of a build, you have many trades coming in to finalise things, and it is so hard to keep people off certain areas. So my experience is completely protect the floor, minimise all risk. It does come at a cost, but it's cheaper than should there be any issues down the track. And then lastly, in our preliminaries, we have site and project management for the duration of this project. This is probably the largest contributor to the cost in preliminaries, but basically we like to have people in charge of a project for the duration. One of the big things that we like to do is we say that we just have one point of contact for the client. So the client doesn't need to go and talk to the plumber and the sparky and try and arrange things themselves. Basically, they have one contact person throughout the process, and it's their job to then manage the rest of the job. So it's a lot of responsibility that falls on their shoulders as they do take all the responsibility for the job. And it is an expensive fee. But again, having someone there on site every day who knows the ins and outs is a way to get the job done quicker, more efficient, generally cheaper, and a better, well-rounded product at the end of the day. So that takes us through preliminaries. Now, basically, as we work our way down, you can see item 1, pool interior to waterline, and we have item 1, pool interior to waterline. It has a brief outline of what the client wants, although the client has indicated that that will be subcontracted out to a third party, and there was no reason for us to have a costing for that. Item 2 came in pool external pool area. Now we were at $105,202.43. And on the right-hand side, we then go into detail of the pool balustrade, pool coping, timber deck, tiled area, external lighting, storage unit. that's a brief explanation of what that line item is, and then we break it down into sections. So items within this cost are as follows. We have a new glass pool balustrade surrounding the existing pool with 2 soft close gates sitting in stainless steel spigots. Now, that's a brief explanation, but basically there's an understanding that it's going to be glass surrounding the pool, 2 soft close gates, as opposed to not itemizing whether it'll be 1 or 2. And it's sitting in stainless steel spigots. Again, we like to specify exactly what the spigots will be. Now, keep in mind there is an architectural drawing that did accompany this quotation, but because this is a video going out to the general public and it is of a client's home, I didn't think it appropriate to be showing that. But keep in mind that there is specified drawings that do go along with this. Then we step down and we've got new pool coping supplied and laid to the perimeter of the existing pool. Allowance for the purchase of new tiles is $70 per linear meter. So we feel it very important that we need to let the client know how much we've allowed for the new tiles. We could just say that there is an allowance purchase of new tiles, but maybe we've allowed $30 a linear meter. Maybe we've allowed $105 a linear meter. And that's where we try and become a little bit transparent and allow the client to know exactly where they stand. If they choose to spend more than $70 a meter, that is when a variation would come into place, and it would be for the difference. If they wanted to come in for a cheaper tile, then that is where a credit would then come into place, and we would be then refunding money back on that progress claim for that item. Next point is a new hardwood deck. We've specified it to be a 90mm black butt or spotted gum material to be laid to approximately 80 square meters of external area to the rear of the home and surrounding pool. The decking to be laid with stainless steel fixings on top of treated timber frame to suit the heights of the new bifold doors. So again, what we've done is we've specified the material that we're going to use, we've specified the approximate size of the deck that we're going to build, and we're specifying what type of fixings we're going to fix it down with to what type of timber frame. Now, these things can be assumed, and 90% of the time, this is probably what is being quoted upon. But you don't want to assume that you're getting a hardwood timber with stainless steel fixings to sign a contract and then find out what you're actually getting is a treated pine deck that's being hand nailed with galvanized clouts. It's not the look that you want. It's not where you thought you were being priced at. And these are small things, but important items that need to be known up front. So you get the idea that as we go through, we try and specify exactly what we're giving you and the cost allowed. So further down here, you can see supply and install 20 new deck lights to the new deck area. The allowance for the purchase of these lights is $40 per light. Now, again, you might assume you're being sold 20 lights, and you might assume a cost per light, but if it's not actually written down, you don't really have a leg to stand on. You can argue that the drawing indicated 40, and chances are that will stand up. But the point being, you don't want to get to that point. You don't want there to be any sort of confusion around what you're entering into with a contract. You want everything to be very black and white, and you want yourself and your builder to be on the same page and both understand what and what's not included. So I'll just briefly go through the next few items. Excuse me. Item 3, we then come to a new timber bifold doors and louvered windows. And as you can see on the left, item 3, we have $61,000. We then, again, articulate exactly what we're going to do. We're going to remove all necessary walls and the installation of structural members as indicated in architectural and engineers' drawings. So like I said before, we do have a set of architectural drawings, and we've also got a specification from an engineer which indicates which walls are to be removed and the type of structural members that are to be installed to support those areas that have been opened up. We're then going to supply and install new timber bifold doors to the architectural and BASIX details. Please note that no allowance has been made to cut the door threshold into the concrete. Please refer to the estimate from Trend Windows. So here you can see that we have provided an actual quotation from our window manufacturer, so they can see the cost and see that we're not pulling the figure out of air. You can see that we've created it to the architectural and BASIX details. And we've also put a note in there so the client knows that we have not made any allowance to cut out any concrete to recess that door any lower than the existing concrete stands. So again, that's just our note to the client, trying to give them information, or as much information as we can. Now, some of you may have picked up that I was referring to a BASIX detail. Basically, what a BASIX detail is another document that comes in, and it gives information on environmental properties of the build. So it will refer to your windows, and it will specify maybe single or double glazing, or other properties, thermal properties with the windows. It will specify cladding thicknesses and thermal properties. It will specify insulation details, and a few other things that we need to make sure that when we're proposing materials, that they do meet up with the BASIX code. We further down have relocating of existing stainless steel downpipe. Please note we have allowed for marine grade 316 stainless steel. Again, a small note, but it lets the client know that we haven't allowed for the top grade stainless steel downpipe. I could have wrote relocating existing stainless steel downpipe, but maybe I was going to allow for regular PVC, which is tremendously cheaper. And that's where more information lets the client know exactly what they're getting and what they're paying for. Again, so you get the gist of how we like to set out our quotes, or at least how we like to provide information when asked for it. And again, this is not indicative of how every quote we submit looks like, but this one has been submitted specifically to meet the needs and the requests of the client. So just showing you there as we come down. Item 6, you'll notice that we have 0 figures allowed. But when you look on the right-hand form, kitchen appliances, these appliances are to be supplied by the owner, but have been allowed for us to install in the kitchen. So basically, in this situation, the client has decided that they're going to go out and source and purchase their appliances themselves, which is fine. There's no for or against whether the client wants to do this. The only thing that we ask is we have adequate time knowing exactly the specification of each item that they're, so that we can allow for that within our joinery. But when you look up at item 4 in the kitchen, you can see one of our line items is to install new appliances to the kitchen. So the client can be confident in knowing that although we've not allocated any cost for the purchase of this, we have allocated a cost to have everything installed. So as we go through the right-hand page they're getting a good indication of what we have allowed. Now, one thing that was done in this situation is we have used what we call a provisional sum. What a provisional sum is it's an allocation of money that we are going to put towards a certain item that we're not 100% sure of the final figure, or there is room for that figure to move up or down. So therefore, we say, okay, we're going to allow this much. If it comes in less, there's a credit. If it comes in more, there'll be a variation. So for the painting, in this situation, we weren't entirely sure of the scope of the painting, so we allowed a $15,000 figure to go with that. And also for item 15, the air conditioning, at the time of pricing, there wasn't a clear scope of works, so we allowed $10,000 for air conditioning. And it gives the client, again, just a good understanding and good knowledge of what has been allowed. If we came in and said we're only going to allow $2,000 for air conditioning and $3,000 for painting, it would reduce our price greatly. And on paper, if you looked at it at a glance, you might say, well, you know, these guys are so much cheaper. But it's the fine print that really gives you clarity and confidence of what you're paying for and what you're signing up for. Now, further on down on the right-hand page, the client asked for a few options. And here we've itemized again each option with a cost allocated next to it. And should they wish to proceed with any of that, that would then become a variation to the main contract of works for that figure that's been allowed. So what we've tried to do, and I believe what we have done, is we've provided a very simple way for them to, at a glance, see our figures, but then also have a bit more of in-depth knowledge as to what is included. Now, since I've touched on what's included, I really want to stress the importance of identifying and knowing what's not included in a price. So it's all well and good to say, you know, I want the joinery and I want lights and I want this and I want that. And as a client, you may just have assumptions that other items are just assumed to be included. But that's not necessarily the case. You are best to, in written form, write down what should not be included in the quote, and you should also get from the builder, or in written form, what's not included. Okay, so like what we've done here, we haven't included any of the pool interiors. We haven't included any kitchen appliances. We haven't included any costs for the purchase and the install of the fireplace. We haven't included any costs for the supply and install of any awnings. So the client can clearly know and clearly understand that there has been zero cost for that. Now, if I didn't have that in my price, it could be assumed at some stage that maybe we did have a price for it. And that's where, you know, gray areas can occur and the conversation may come up, and it might go something like this where you go, well, I thought you included it in your price. And the builder might say, well, no, I didn't. The client might say, well, you never told me that you weren't including it. I just assumed, and it was on the drawings. So this is a type of scenario that can cause friction and frustration and conflict on site, and it's best to avoid it. And the way to avoid it is to be upfront from the very, very start before anything has gotten underway. And it's just to try and articulate everything the best way possible. Now, generally, what happens is when we present a quote, we present obviously these two documents. We also provide other documentation along with this. That's just part of our package and part of the process that we go through. But basically, the next step that's taken when a client agrees to the price is you then get a contract. Now, what we do is we issue a draft contract that has all the particulars of the client, the builder, the specification of the job, the cost of the job, the location of the job, and that's where we go into specific details of what's included and what's not included, and we send that to the client. And we give the client ample time to read it and to understand it and to make sure that they've gone through the list of what's included and what's not included, and that it's all very black and white and that everything's covered. And should there be any questions or any changes, it's very easy to raise them at that point. No one's committed to anything, right? There hasn't been any conflict, to date, and there should be really no objections to sitting down and either negotiating or discussing what should or shouldn't be left out of certain lists. Once that has been decided upon, the final contract or hard copy contract will be issued, and that's also issued with all supporting specification documents. So the contract should be signed coinciding with architect's details, engineer's details, the BASIX requirements, and any other bits of information that you have that specifically relates to the job and specifically relates to the quotations in the contract needs to be included in the contract. And I do suggest that not only do you sign and date where the contract asks, but you also sign in every page of the contract and every page of all the details, and keep it in one complete package. And basically, it's good for both parties because sometimes challenges and conflicts may arise from time to time, and not even conflict, but just general questions or people may have thought things are included or not included. And if you can go back and specifically point to it on a signed bit of paper and say, look, this is what we decided upon, this is where we signed off on it, basically it ends all discussion, and everyone knows exactly where they stand. So I really feel that it's very important for both the client and the builder to take the time and be diligent. It is time consuming, and it may seem like frustrating and a waste of time at that time of signing, but it really is to benefit both parties. And if both parties are happy to agree and sign off on it at the beginning, then there should be no reason for any questions to arise during the build. What then follows on from when a contract is signed is it then gets sent away to the builder's homeowner's warranty insurer along with an application, and that's an application for homeowner's warranty for that particular project. That insurance can take anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks to come back, and once that insurance document has been received, it can then get forward onto either the private certifying authority or council, whoever's going to be overseeing the project, and that can be then allocated to all their documentation, in which turn we await the construction certificate. And basically, once we've had the construction certificate, we can then commence works on site. So you do need to understand that just because you've signed the contract doesn't mean that you can start work the next day. There is a process that needs to take place. There are specific steps legally that need to happen before you can commence work. But on the other hand, as the client who's just signed the contract, you need to be aware that there is a cooling off period, and you should be made aware of that at the time of signing the contract. Should you feel that you were, maybe pressured into it or something, there is an avenue for you to go through with a minimum time frame, or maximum time frame, I should say, for you to do that. But I've I've not heard of this happening before. Generally, if parties are ready to sign contracts, everyone is happy to go. So, look, I hope this has been of some assistance and help to everyone. Like I said, there are many different ways that builders are going to present information to you, but the most important thing to know is that you are getting the most accurate information given to you in the best way possible, and in a way that you can compare. There's no point having two quotations like I have on the left that just come down to a round figure. If you're comparing 453 to another price that looks similar to this, maybe 400,000, but there's no other documentation to go along with it, there's a lot of room for inclusions or non-inclusions or grey area that's not going to give you confidence as to what's included. One of the big things that I have found is often people will look at the cheapest price, and it's going to be attractive to many people, and I understand that. In the way it is today, many people, find that to renovate their house is a huge investment. And let's say there was a chance for a $50,000 savings. That's a lot of money. But what you really need to know is it actually a $50,000 saving, or is there hidden costs that you're going to pay for later? And often what we find is that people who do actually choose a cheaper price often pay more in the long run because they weren't educated correctly on what was included and not included at the front. They were sold a cheaper price, but they were also sold a cheaper job. But the reality was they didn't want a cheaper job. They had a certain specification list, but they didn't explain that to the builder, and the builder then didn't explain back to them what was included. So I feel that is the most important thing that needs to be understood when getting a job priced. So, like I said, I hope that was helped and informative. It's just my way of giving a little bit of insight from a builder's perspective. Should you have any questions, please feel free to reach out and contact us by email or by phone. And I hope this gives you confidence when entering into your renovation, which sounds like many of you are going down that path, and it's a very exciting time for you. So I wish you all the best, and I hope everything goes well and smoothly for you. Thank you for listening, and thanks for watching. Bye.